live in interesting times. Today's stories. In Nigeria's crime hit Port Harcourt, rape victims find their voice. Joseph Borrell says the World Trade Organization is inoperational due to a, quote, lack of cooperation from the United States. Central European mayors sign a pact of free cities. Mexico won't accept U.S. officials who exceed their duties. On United States and Cuba relations, from sudden warming to an icy plunge. Larry Kudlow says on U.S.-China trade agreement, quote, the deal is done. Mexican negotiator is satisfied by U.S. assurances on labor inspectors. On the Trump impeachment inquiry, Schumer calls for a speedy and fair trial and requests 4 witnesses. Plus, we will take you to Washington State and visit Lake Sammamish, where days in the sun are made more fun. This is Eagle News, coming to you from New York, bringing you stories from around the globe. And I am Jennifer Palantan. Amaka, a Médecins Sans Frontières employee, and Doris, manager of a program helping to empower young girls in Port Harcourt, both work to help victims of sexual violence and raise awareness about rape. In Nigeria, Africa's most populous country, more and more women and girls are daring to speak out and denounce their sexual violence they have suffered.
Okay, basically the brain behind us having a community volunteer within the community is because we realize they understand the community structure, and it's for us to have an eye in the community, people that the community can be comfortable with, and people that knows and understand the culture of the community.
The women are not aware of their rights. It's been a problem. So that's why our major strategy is advocacy, is sensitization. So we tell them, we educate them of their rights. That's why we have sexual and reproductive rights campaign, where a girl should determine what she does with her body. It's your choice, it's your body. I mean, nobody needs to abuse you or force you into doing what you don't want to do.
Well, since I started working here, I've really improved in my confidence, capacity building, like morals. I've really improved, unlike before when I've not been able to. Sometimes I used to be very shy, but now I can be bold enough to stand out and speak to the public.
As a community volunteer, I calm her down, then I will refer her to MSF clinic for treatments, where they will treat her on prevention of HIV and AIDS, treat her on prevention of sexual transmitted infections, and social welfare if it's a kid.
The figures for admissions to the Little Clinic speak amply about the scale of rape in Port Harcourt. Since the start of the year, more than 1,200 patients have sought help there. In October alone, there were 148 new admissions. Port Harcourt has many of the fundamental problems of poverty and inequality, which are familiar to Nigeria's big cities. But it is also in the grip of notorious gangs called cults, which emerge from university campuses to become organized crime groups and frequently engage in blood rituals and oaths. They carry out raids, ransoms, kidnappings, and other crimes, in which the victim often suffers sexual violence. Christine Harrison, an MSF coordinator in the rundown district of Diobu, said, quote, when there are cultist clashes in the community, people scatter everywhere, and armed robbers go inside the houses and they rape the girls. The 42-year-old mother patrols the gritty streets, handing out an emergency number that victims can call, a task that she has been doing for 2 years. She said, quote, my job is to let the women know that they need to stand up for their rights. Before, rape was a normal thing. The MSF Rape Awareness Campaign includes messages on local radios and stickers which are handed out on public transport. The situation, while grim, is changing bit by bit, a shift that came after 9 women were drugged and strangled in Port Harcourt hotels in a string of gruesome ritualistic-style killings. Ibim Semitari, a well-known local activist who led protest marches joined by hundreds of feminists, said, quote, "We never saw something like that. The whole city just rose up. We said enough is enough." Singapore Foreign Affairs Minister Vivian Balakrishnan and High Representative of the Union for Foreign Affairs and Security Policy, Joseph Borrell, hold a press conference on the last day of the 14th edition of the Asia-Europe Conference in Madrid, designed to unify the economic regions.
I use this opportunity to regret that the World Trade Organization has become unoperational due to the lack of cooperation of the United States.
Now, even more than before, the raison d'etre of ASEM is even more salient. This is a time of great change, a time when there's a pushback against globalization, against free trade, against economic integration.
And even if the net balance is positive, we have to take into account the losers. And maybe we were not aware that the number of losers were so big. And what's happening today in the world, in many countries, is a little bit the backlash of globalization.
The European Union on Thursday proposed a move to strengthen its power to hit back in global trade rows, looking for defensive alternatives after the U.S. crippled the WTO. The new measures would hand Brussels power to unilaterally decide countermeasures against other countries, a power that traditionally sits with the World Trade Organization in Geneva. Sometimes referred to as the Supreme Court of Global Trade, the WTO has since Wednesday been unable to issue rulings, victim of a campaign by President Donald Trump, accusing it of anti-U.S. bias. The Trump administration has for 2 years blocked appointments to the WTO's appellate body, and work there finally broke down on Wednesday when just one sitting member remained. The European Union Trade Commissioner Phil Hogan said, quote, "Whilst we seek to reform the WTO and re-establish a well-functioning WTO trade system, we cannot afford being defenseless if there is no possibility to get a satisfactory solution within the WTO." Hogan added, quote, "Today's proposals will let us defend our interests in these particularly uneasy times for international trade. WTO membership currently bars countries from unilaterally calculating and imposing countermeasures, and with the new measures, the European Union would reclaim that authority." Hogan said these, quote, "will allow us to defend our companies, workers, and consumers whenever our partners do not play by the rules." At the European Union Summit on Thursday and Friday in Brussels, according to a draft seen by AFP, European leaders will urge the European Parliament and the member states to, quote, "to examine the Commission's proposal as a priority." The breakdown at the WTO came despite months of talks to reconcile the U.S. against the WTO's 163 members, which include China. The U.S. has wide-ranging concerns about the WTO, which predate Trump's presidency, with its allegedly soft stance on China a main criticism. Trump's trade officials have also argued that the U.S. Constitution does not permit a foreign court to supersede an American one. The European Union is also seeking to create ad hoc arbitration process with other countries, during which the WTO stalemate, but so far only a handful of other countries have signed on. The fight over the WTO is one of several fronts pitting the U.S. against the European Union. Over the past 3 years, Trump has hit Europe with steel and aluminum tariffs, threatened similar levies on cars, and drawn up plans to target French champagne and handbags as retaliation over a digital tax in France. 4 Central European capitals, all at odds with their country's populist governments, signed a deal in Budapest to seek more European Union funding together to bypass their nation's rulers. The pro-European centrist mayors of Budapest, Bratislava, Prague, and Warsaw, the capitals of Visegrad countries Hungary, Slovakia, and Czech Republic, and Poland, signed what they called the Pact of Free Cities.
So together we can be part of the solution for the problems that our citizens suffer from nowadays. And I believe that we will succeed in this task, because if we would fail, this would mean a new wave of populism, a populism that would provide a simple and wrong answer to the problems.
I was a member of European Parliament, Minister of European Affairs, and we tried within the Visegrad Group to actually put forward constructive ideas. Unfortunately, today is used actually to be on the defensive and to block things instead of proposing new initiatives. That's why we undertook this initiative to actually work together and propose things that can move us forward. We are close to the people, closest and closer than national governments. That's why we want to actually base our initiatives on evidence, not on ideology, and that makes us a bit different than some of our governments.
Egyre többeket háborít föl, hogy az európai fejlesztési pénzek a régióban a korrupciót és az autokráciát finanszírozzák. Nem szeretnénk, ha városaink látnák ennek a kárát. Ezért többek között arra is teszünk közös erőfeszítéseket, hogy az európai döntéshozókat meggyőzzük arról, hogy helyes az önkormányzati és más autonóm szereplők számára az eddigieknél lényegesen több forrást közvetlenül is hozzáférhetővé tenni.
Mexican Foreign Minister Marcelo Ebrard says his country will not accept foreign officials who, quote, attempt to carry out tasks that exceed those established by law, as he rejects the United States' intention to send officials to the Latin American country to monitor compliance with the USMCA trade agreement.
El límite de México es que no aceptaremos ninguna persona, funcionario de otro país, que pretenda hacer labores que excedan las que están establecidas en la ley. Es decir,
ha habido un consenso generalizado, unánime, de apoyar la construcción, la implementación del programa de desarrollo Tren Maya. Este ha sido.
Up next, on U.S. and Cuba relations, from sudden warming to an icy plunge. Larry Kudlow says on U.S.-China trade agreement, quote, the deal is done. Mexican negotiator is satisfied by United States assurances on labor inspectors. On the Trump impeachment inquiry, Schumer calls for a speedy and fair trial and requests 4 witnesses. Eagle News will be right back. Stay with us. Welcome back. This is Eagle News, coming to you from New York, and I'm Jennifer Polintan. Cold War enemies for more than 5 decades, Cuba and the United States dramatically improved their ties in 2014 before an icy reversal under President Donald Trump 5 years ago. Havana's top diplomat in charge of relations with Washington said Cuba is bracing for the possibility of the United States breaking off diplomatic ties, but will seek to maintain them nonetheless. Summing up months of mounting tension between the two countries, Carlos Fernandez de Cosio said, quote, we must be aware that this can get worse. He said the reason for the downturn in relations 5 years after historic thaw between the Cold War foes is simple. Those in charge of U.S. policy towards the Western Hemisphere have attitudes and positions that are extremely aggressive towards our country. He said, quote, we are seeing that they want to do is break all the existing links, to close the embassies. Fernandez de Cosio, Director General of the U.S. desk at Cuba's Foreign Ministry, said, quote, we hope that this won't be the case, but we cannot trust that this will not happen. We are prepared, ready for such an eventuality, but we do not wish it. The embassies were reopened in 2015, months after U.S. President Barack Obama and Raul Castro arrived to revive diplomatic ties severed since 1961. It was a shining moment that drew a line under nearly 6 decades of Cold War rivalry and promised a new era of openness.
Que es que Trump va a querer romper las relaciones diplomáticas. Es posible porque las relaciones diplomáticas prácticamente ya son una bobería. Ya no existen relaciones prácticamente. Ya las relaciones más importantes entre nosotros son las relaciones migratorias. Y eso se ha afectado a un nivel tal que ya las relaciones diplomáticas, ¿cuáles son?
Lo que se ve hoy por hoy con ese señor Trump, que Dios me perdone, pero es horrible. Con Obama hubo un respiro y una esperanza.
Siempre se busca algún motivo u otro para caer en riña sin necesidad. En fin, es exactamente eso, una pareja que no se entiende.
White House economic advisor Larry Kudlow says the Phase 1 trade deal between the United States and China is completed, noting that U.S. exports to China will double under the agreement. Kudlow also says the United States hopes to negotiate a trade deal with the United Kingdom as soon as possible. Take a look.
You got to go through, as you may know, translations have to happen, and everybody's got to line up. I call it clerical. I don't mean to demean it. It's just part of that process. And I think Bob Lighthizer yesterday said it would be done the first week or very early part of January. But let me make no mistake about it. The deal is done. The deal is completed. The deal calls for $200 billion additional U.S. exports in these hard goods areas, or in Chinese case imports. We are going to double U.S. exports. The positive effects on economic growth in this country cannot be exaggerated. That's why. Well, pretty soon we'll sign the dotted line on Phase 1. I think it's a ministerial signing, Mr. Lighthizer and Vice Premier Liu He. I offered my office upstairs on the second floor. And after that, Phase 2. Well, we look forward to a trade deal with Prime Minister Boris Johnson. We have all along, the President has said this all along, and we'll probably get started on that very soon. I believe National Security Deputy Matt Pottinger and I are going over there in early January, some such, to talk about a lot of things, including trade. So no specifics on that, but I would just say as soon as possible. Let me just take...
Jesus Seade, Mexico's top trade negotiator for North America, says he is very satisfied by assurances that he received from officials in Washington that the United States will not deploy labor inspectors in Mexico as part of a new North American trade deal. Washington on Monday moved to reassure the Mexican government that the United States will not station labor inspectors at the U.S. Embassy as part of a new Continental Trade Pact. The overture by U.S. Trade Representative Robert Lighthizer sought to overcome a last-minute snag as U.S. lawmakers face a ticking clock to ratify the U.S.-Mexico-Canada agreement. Mexican officials were alarmed by the draft legislation that submitted Congress to implement the USMCA that calls for the United States officials to monitor Mexico's compliance with the labor provisions of the treaty. That seemed to cross a red line for Mexico, which opposed allowing foreign inspectors into factories to determine working conditions and wages. Jesus Seade, Mexico's chief trade negotiator for North America, traveled to Washington on Sunday, seeking clarification from President Donald Trump's administration.
Yeah, satisfied. Yeah, very satisfied. Yeah. And I conducted the authorities in Mexico, and they're satisfied. But yeah, absolutely. This is very categorical. These personnel will not be labor inspectors. We discussed, I tell you, between us, in private, confidential, I tell you, we discussed adding words, such as, and therefore will not visit the plant or something. But we concluded anything you add reduces the coverage of the negative. There will not be labor inspectors.
But he said the issue in the legislation should have been discussed with Mexican officials, and their meeting with Lighthizer very correctly and amably apologized.
Surgió este tema que ya conocemos todos en la legislación interna de Estados Unidos, legislación que no se discute con México, es algo interno, refleja lo acordado en el tratado, pero cualquier cosa adicional que tenga es cuestión de ellos. Surgió esta cuestión en la que necesitamos una aclaración respecto a un punto específico y la solicitamos.
Though the deal was initially signed more than a year ago, U.S. Democrats held up ratification to demand greater oversight of Mexican labor compliance. The country signed the amended trade pact last week. In a letter to Seade on Monday, Lighthizer said U.S. officials added provisions for as many as 5 Labor Department attachés posted to the U.S. Embassy in Mexico to collaborate with officials, workers, and civil society organizations to implement labor reforms. The USMCA also allows for independent 3-person panels, chose mutually by member countries, to conduct on-site verifications if labor rights are not respected, Lighthizer added. Senate Democratic leader Chuck Schumer calls for a speedy and fair trial of U.S. President Donald Trump if the House impeaches him this week. Schumer also said that in a letter he wrote to Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, he proposed 4 witnesses who have direct knowledge of why the aid to Ukraine was delayed and asked that subpoenas for documents directly related to the changes be brought before the Senate.
The 4 witnesses we propose have direct knowledge of why the aid to Ukraine was delayed. We don't know what kind of evidence they will present. They might present exculpatory evidence that helps President Trump. It may be incriminating against the president, but they should be heard. We also propose that subpoenas for documents that are directly related to the charges brought by the House come forward. There's always a lot of attention on the question of witnesses, but these documents are also of great importance when it comes to making sure senators have what they need to make a fully informed decision. I haven't seen a single good argument about why these witnesses shouldn't testify or these documents be produced, unless the president has something to hide and his supporters want that information hidden. The trial structure I outlined in my letter to Leader McConnell will ensure that all the relevant facts come out without dilatory action. You know, there is a grand American tradition of a speedy and fair trial. That's just what we've proposed here. And I expect Republicans would be sympathetic to our proposal for that reason. If Leader McConnell doesn't hold a full and fair trial, the American people will rightly ask, what are you, Leader McConnell, and what is President Trump hiding?
Next on Eagle News, we will take you to Washington State and visit Lake Sammamish, where days in the sun are made more fun. Stay with us. Welcome back. This is Eagle News, coming to you from New York, and I am Jennifer Polintan. Eagle News correspondents Michael Hudson and Frendel Fregeran take us to Lake Sammamish in Washington State, where days in the sun are made more fun. Take a look.
There are 8,000 lakes here in Washington State. How do you choose which one to bring your family to? I mean, you can go online and do your research, you can go out and venture on your own, or you can take the recommendations of others. Today, I'm here with my co-correspondent, Michael Hudson, and our friends have actually recommended that we visit and check out Lake Sammamish, which is the lake that you see right behind us. And being here for just a couple of hours, we learned a lot of great facts about this place. Many families of Washington State stay committed investing in creating more fun, fond memories, which are to serve as a way to edify the relationships that keep one motivated and driven.
So here at Lake Sammamish Park, it's nestled between Issaquah and Sammamish, which are the 2 biggest tech cities in the state of Washington. Additionally, there are at least 4 Native American tribes that resided around the lake back in the day. So here there are tons of water activities, playgrounds for the children, and tons of trails that hiker enthusiasts can indulge in. Hey guys, hope you enjoyed the sounds and views of beautiful Lake Sammamish today. Please put it on your bucket list for the next Washington State adventure you pursue.
Exactly, and create the quality time that you need to build the relationships that matter to you most. From Issaquah, Washington, I'm Frendel Fregeran.
And I'm Michael Hudson.
And we are one with 25.
Stuck in this winter weather here in the East Coast, you don't know how inviting Lake Sammamish is right now. Thanks, Mike and Frendel. That is today's Eagle News. Join us again tomorrow for stories that matter to you. Visit our websites at eaglenews.net and eaglenewslive.com. Follow us on Twitter at twitter.com/eaglenews and on Facebook at facebook.com/eaglenews. Thank you for watching. I am Jennifer Pollenten, and I am one with 25.